To celebrate more than 20,000 subscribers, I am making this video answering some questions that you might have about me or about the channel in general. Now, if you didn't get a chance to ask a question up here, don't worry, because I plan on doing another one of these when I get up to 50,000 subscribers. So feel free to continue to ask questions on this feed. Now, unfortunately, I can't answer the first question because it says that the comment is held for review, and I've been trying for like 2 hours to try to unhide the comment, but for some reason it's not letting me. So if you're the person that asked that question, I'm sorry, I'm still trying to figure out how to unhide this comment. Okay, the first question asks, have you ever seen a heritage unit? I actually have. I've seen some Norfolk Southern heritage units. I've also seen some Norfolk Southern locomotives with the Conrail quality logo a while back. Okay, the next question is, can you do a RENFE train horn video? I actually made a horn for the RENFE S449. However, I haven't made any other RENFE horns since because it's really hard to find videos of Spanish trains blowing their horns. If I can find another video of a RENFE locomotive blowing its horn, then I will make one in the future, or at least I will make plans to. Okay, and the next question is, how do you make the railroad crossings? I actually don't make the railroad crossing signs, someone else does. However, I do make the sound effects for them, or most of the sound effects that you hear in the videos, and I also arrange them in such a way as you see in the videos. Now, I actually have a few tutorials on how to use the ATLS system, which I use for programming these railroad crossings and intersections, and I'll put a link to them in the description. There's actually a lot you can do with this system. You can even control drawbridges and have trains waiting for boats as the bridge opens, and cars as well. So yeah, I actually have tutorials on how to do a lot of amazing things with this system, and I'll put a link to the part 1 of that series in the description. Okay, the next question says, can you make an Amtrak F59PHI horn? I plan on doing that in the future. However, my horn videos aren't really that popular, or at least they're not as popular as they used to be, and they don't make as much money as they used to, so I don't really make them that often. However, I do have plans to make an F59PHI horn in the future. Okay, so this question says, have you done with Hawaii yet in Trainz a New Era so Shinkansen and Amtraks get across? Okay, I think this guy's talking about my California and Hawaii connecting bridge, which is a fictional bridge I built that well, basically one day I had the idea, what if there was a bridge linking Hawaii with California? And I basically built the starting section of that bridge in the game. The starting section of the bridge is located on I-5, somewhere between San Diego and Los Angeles. That's basically where I decided to put it. Now, while I'm building this bridge, I'm thinking to myself, wait a second, how far is Hawaii from California? Is this bridge even practical? Well, as it turns out, Hawaii is 3,000 miles away from California. After finding this out, I thought to myself, wow, that's approximately the length of the entire United States of America. So I would have to build a bridge as long as the country of the United States to span from California to Hawaii. This bridge would have to be so long that it would have to take into consideration the curvature of the Earth as well. Now, assuming you could even possibly build a bridge this long, there's another problem that comes up. And that problem is no one can drive for 3,000 straight miles, and I can't imagine that anyone would want to. Even if a bridge like this existed, most people would probably still choose to fly a plane instead, just because they don't want to drive for 3,000 miles. Also, no one's car can drive for 3,000 miles on one tank of gas, so obviously some rest areas would have to be built between California and Hawaii. And of course, the obvious problem is, how are you going to put a rest area on a bridge? I mean, theoretically, you could build large sections of the bridge that are similar in design to oil rigs and basically have entire cities supported on these stilts in the Pacific Ocean, but that would obviously get expensive. Also, you'd have to build towns in this area too, because no one's going to want to work on this bridge in one of these rest areas if their home is 1,000 miles away. So there's going to have to be houses as well so that the people who work here can also live here. And then who's going to want to live in the middle of the Pacific Ocean? So that's another problem. You'd have to somehow convince them to move and work here. So they'd probably have to have higher salaries than the average workers at rest areas. Now, one plan I had for the rest areas is, rather than making it so that they have to be supported on bridges, it would probably be cheaper to build man-made islands and then just build the towns on these islands. However, I didn't realize at the time when planning these islands that we are apparently running out of sand, so probably no one's going to want to just dump a bunch of it into the Pacific Ocean to create these man-made islands. Either way, I actually started making one of these man-made islands in the game, and I have a few pictures of basically the way I decided it should look. So this is basically what the entrance to the highway looks like. Basically, it's located on I-5 between San Diego and Los Angeles, and I'll explain a little bit more on that later, why I chose that location. Anyway, basically you enter the highway from either one of those two directions, and you go up this ramp, and it gradually transitions to a suspension bridge that's tall enough to fit over the container ships that will likely be traveling in the area. And here you see a series of off-ramps that lead off the bridge onto the rest area / island / town that will somehow have to be self-sustaining, otherwise it's going to cost money to run these areas. So anyway, this is basically what this is also a bridge that leads to another island. This one's basically just for tourism. There's a lighthouse there, and in the future I'm going to be putting a few other attractions there, like an amusement park or something. Of course, this would probably be a waste of money because you're just building another island for no reason. So anyway, those monorail stations, that's pretty much where the people will be housed. And then here's one of the fueling facilities. It's going to have a very high capacity for all the cars that will be coming off the highway to get some fuel. There's also a truck stop on this island because obviously trucks might end up making deliveries between California and Hawaii after this bridge is built. So it's going to be there's going to have to be an area where they can rest and get fuel and all that stuff. And then it just continues after that. Now, the first rest area I built to be 5 miles off the coast of California, so that if you made a mistake and got onto this bridge by accident, you have ample time to turn around and, change your mind. Otherwise they'll be spaced probably 150 miles from each other, or maybe 50 miles. I don't know. I haven't really made that decision yet. Now, some of you might notice that there is another point in California that's a lot closer to Hawaii than Los Angeles and San Diego, and that is Point Arena. I actually remember in one documentary about North American lighthouses, the guy specifically pointed out that this is the closest point of land to Hawaii on the entire continent of North America. However, I figured no one would want to drive all the way out to where this lighthouse is in order to get to the bridge because it would be too far out of their way. I decided to make it closer to a populated area, so that's why I chose the area between San Diego and Los Angeles as the starting point of the bridge, even though it'll probably be at least slightly cheaper to have it start at Point Arena instead. That would actually be kind of cool though, because you'd have the scenery of the lighthouse as you approach the bridge. So maybe that would be a better option to choose. And now for the reason the California-Hawaii connecting bridge wouldn't be possible on the Hawaiian side of the bridge. Now, the first route I originally planned brought the bridge right over a volcano called Loihi, which is an underwater active volcano that erupts occasionally, and And as soon as I realized that, I moved the bridge further to the east because I realized, okay, lava can travel underwater completely unimpeded, so if it hits one of the bridge structures, it'll end up destroying the bridge more than likely. And of course, I also knew that the Hawaiian Islands have 5 active volcanoes, 4 of which are on the Big Island. I actually originally didn't want to choose the Big Island as the location where the bridge will end up for that specific reason. However, since the Big Island is the closest one to California, it would probably end up being considered as the most practical one for the bridge to end up at. So, realizing that Kilauea is on the western area of the island, I thought, well, since I can't build the bridge here, I want to build it as far as you physically can be from the nearest volcano. And the furthest, as far as I knew, that you could be from any volcano on this island was the eastern tip of the island. So, I was originally going to have the bridge end up at Pahoa, the town you see on the eastern area of the island, thinking, well, that's as far as you can possibly be from a volcano, so it would probably be safe from lava. But ironically enough, Pahoa is one of the many towns that is currently being destroyed by lava from this very volcano. It turns out that lava can come out of the ground anywhere on this island, not just at the summit of the volcano. In this case, it came out of the ground several miles east of the crater in the area known as the Lower East Rift Zone. So that would not be a very practical area to build a bridge. Imagine you drive for 3,000 miles to find out that the end of the bridge is blocked by lava. Not only that, but if lava ends up on the bridge, it could end up destroying it and causing further damage. So I decided to move the end of the bridge somewhere else. Hopefully there is another location on this island, I thought, where it would be safe from volcanoes. Okay, so later I decided to move the end of the bridge to the north side of the island, but then I realized another volcano exists there called Mauna Kea. So I did some research to try and figure out when was the last time it erupted. It turns out it hasn't erupted for 4,000 years, but it's still active, which means it still can erupt in the future. So that far into the future, building a bridge on this island, it's very possible that the volcano could be close to reactivating. So it wouldn't be safe to build a bridge here either. So I said, what about the western side of the island? But it turns out that was out of the question too, because another volcano called Mauna Loa exists there, and that volcano is also active. It hasn't erupted in a while, but it's still very possible for it to erupt in the future. I think the last time it erupted was 50 years ago. So it's still pretty recent. So I decided, okay, this entire island is out of the question. No matter where you put a bridge, you are not safe from lava. The lava can come out of the ground anywhere on this island that it wants to, and there's nothing you can do to stop it. And there's nothing you can do to protect the bridge from the lava, because every single attempt that has ever been made to redirect the lava or stop the lava, it has failed. So there will be no way to protect the bridge if it becomes in the path of the lava. So I said, okay, let's just not have the bridge go here. Let's take it to one of the islands that only has extinct volcanoes. So I chose the city of Honolulu on the island of Oahu instead, because none of the volcanoes on that island are active. They're all extinct, and they will very likely never erupt again because their source of magma has been removed. So I chose Honolulu as the area where the bridge will end up. Now, the reason why I haven't finished this route in the game, and why I probably won't be doing so in the near future, is because the game probably will not be able to process 3,000 miles of water. In fact, I don't even know if you can build a 3,000 mile long route in this game and it actually be able to function. I was really only planning on building the beginning section, at least one rest area, so you could get the idea of what it would look like, and the end section. I wasn't really planning on completing the whole. This is how the highway would enter Honolulu. It would basically curve as far away from the Big Island as possible so that the lava flow can't reach any of the bridge structures and destroy them. It would end up at Honolulu, and it would end at this intersection between H1 and Route 61. There would be an off-ramp that will take you to H1 in both directions, and then the highway will continue further northeast and it will merge with Route 61. That's basically how I designed the end of the bridge to work. And somehow without having to demolish any of these buildings, obviously, because if you did that, that would probably cause even more reason for people to protest the construction of this bridge. No one's going to want to have to lose their house or business for this bridge to exist. So that's something that has to be considered. Anyway, back to the questions. Okay, the next question is, do you like traffic lights? Yeah, I find traffic lights interesting. Okay, so the next question is, for Trainz a New Era, do you know where to get Amtrak Viewliner equipment? Because I really want some Amtrak Viewliner equipment. There's some Amtrak Viewliner sleeping cars on Trainz commuter rail. However, be aware that they tilt toward the outside of the curve when you have the banking enabled. Not sure why they set it up that way, but that's just the way it is. Anyway, I think these cars are faulty by default when you download them, so you might be able to fix them using the PevSoft tools. Okay, so the next comment says, do it all? I'm not quite sure what he means by that. Like, is that supposed to be a question? I don't know. I'm not really sure how to respond to that. Anyway, the next one is, what is your favorite railroad company paint scheme and why? I like this paint scheme on the TGV because I think silver, dark blue, light blue, red, aqua green, and gray are 6 really good colors to paint a passenger train with, especially when they're all used at the same time. Okay, so the next question is, what is your favorite locomotive and why? The Aero 3 has always been my favorite locomotive. To understand why, here's a little backstory. Growing up in North Carolina, if there was one thing I knew about trains, it was that every train had a locomotive in the front of it, and the driver sat in the lead locomotive in order to drive it. So imagine my confusion when we moved to New Jersey and we're waiting at a red light near a New Jersey Transit bridge, and I see a train flying across the bridge at 80 miles per hour with the passenger cars in front and the locomotive in the back pushing it at around 80 miles per hour. I remember thinking to myself, wow, that must take a lot of training to be able to drive the train that fast in reverse. It must be really difficult seeing when to start slowing down for stations and where to blow your horn at a railroad crossing. I remember thinking to myself. It was actually my assumption at the time that the drivers were relying solely on their side view mirrors to see where they were going when the train was operating in reverse. I actually remember the first time we rode a New Jersey Transit train. As the train pulled into Netherwood Station, the cab car was in front, as usual. They are usually in front when the train is headed for Newark. Anyway, after getting off at Newark, I saw another train that intrigued me. It was an Amtrak E60CP. Now, the main thing that intrigued me about this locomotive was it had the flattest front that I've ever seen. I've never seen a locomotive that was so flat in the front. Well, besides the cab cars, of course. But another thing that intrigued me was that this locomotive had metal bars on the windshield. And to this day, I'm not entirely sure what these metal bars are used for. I've noticed that a lot of Indian locomotives also have these on their cabs, and some Mexican locomotives have them as well. If you know what these metal bars are used for, feel free to leave it in the comment section, because that's actually something I'm still not sure about to this day. However, I'm assuming their use is to protect the engineers from vandals that would try to throw something at the windshield. I'm thinking the idea is that it hits the metal bars instead of the windshield, and it prevents the glass from breaking or cracking. So that's probably what the reason is. However, I'm pretty sure this will ruin the streamline of the locomotive. To be fair though, this locomotive isn't that streamlined to begin with. The E60CP is actually another one of my favorite locomotives, specifically because I really like the way its horn sounds. It has a horn that's so loud that you would think a freight train was arriving at the station. When I was a kid, I used to refer to Amfleet cars as Metroliner cars because I heard someone else refer to them as that, and I thought that was their official term. However, I would later find out that Metroliner belongs to another fleet of Amtrak train cars that are pretty much the same design as the Aero 3 trains, only they can travel a lot faster. They were originally designed for speeds of 160 miles per hour, but I think they can only go up to 125. I've actually never seen a Metroliner train car, which is weird because they were still in service when I was a kid. I think they were taken out of service in late 2001, or was it late 2000? Anyway, getting back to the story, while at Newark Penn Station, the New Jersey Transit train bound for Bayhead arrived at the station, and it also had a cab car in the front with an electric locomotive in the rear. And I thought to myself, okay, so apparently passenger trains travel in reverse, freight trains travel forward, and intercity passenger trains travel forward, because I've never seen a intercity train with a cab car in front before. Of course, later I'd find out that Amtrak does have trains with cab cars, like the Keystone, but I haven't seen one yet at that time. While getting off the train in Elizabeth, I noticed that the train was tilting toward the inside of the curve as it departed, and I thought to myself, well, I did not know New Jersey Transit had tilt trains. Does it really make much sense, though, to waste so much money on commuter trains that they can tilt toward the inside of the curve? I would later find out, of course, that the train wasn't what was tilting, the curve was. The curve was tilted toward the inside so that the trains would tilt when going over them. This was basically so that when the faster trains, like the Amtrak, went through the station without stopping, they wouldn't have to slow down for the curve. Now, we were on track 1 waiting for the train to take us back to Newark. I was expecting to see another passenger train with the cab car in front and an electric locomotive pushing in the rear. But what I got this time was something rather different. First of all, it didn't have the same horn as the other New Jersey Transit trains. This train had the most beautiful horn that I have ever heard. This train also made the most beautiful sounds when accelerating and decelerating. Throughout most of my childhood, the sounds these locomotives emit were stuck in my head like a catchy song that you just can't get out. I literally could not stop remembering these sounds. Of all the locomotives I have heard, I've always thought that this locomotive makes the most beautiful sounds of them all. And that is pretty much why the Aero 3 is my favorite locomotive. There are other reasons too. This locomotive was just so interesting to me because it was very unique. It was the only locomotive like it on the entire New Jersey Transit fleet. I remember having so many questions about this locomotive because it was so different than any locomotive I've ever seen. The main question I had was, where was this locomotive getting its power from? I mean, I knew that at this point New Jersey Transit had cab cars that could control a locomotive even if the locomotive is in the rear of the train pushing it, and that the locomotive can basically read the commands given by the cab car. But this train did not appear to have a locomotive on it. It looked like there was a cab car in the front and one in the rear. So what was powering it, I wondered. I mean, I knew that it had pantographs on it, so I assumed that it was an electric locomotive getting its power from the wires. But where was this electricity going? How did it get to the wheels? Because you see, on other electric locomotives that I've seen since this one, there's always a lot of equipment inside it that takes up a lot of space between the front and the rear. But these locomotives had enough space to fit passengers, so somehow they were able to shrink all of this equipment down to the point where it could fit underneath the floor, which I found interesting. Other questions I remember having was, can this locomotive pull more than one trailer unit at a time? Because I've noticed that every other car on this train always had a pantograph sticking out of it, which meant that every other car must have been powered. But if that's the case, can it actually pull more than one trailer unit at a time? And if so, how many trailer units can it pull at one time? Like, is it ever possible to see one of these pulling 9 passenger cars like you sometimes see the Out 44s or Out 46s pulling? Or is it only powerful enough to pull one trailer unit? Also, another question I remember having is, could it pull freight cars? And if so, how many freight cars could it pull at one time? I imagine it can only pull one at a time though, because it doesn't really look that powerful. Now, the main question I had about this train was, what type of train was it? It didn't look like any other train that I had seen. I remember asking other passengers if they knew what type of train it was. Sadly, none of them knew. Eventually, after checking out a bunch of books on trains at a local library, I finally found one that explained in great detail what this locomotive was. It was an electric multiple unit, or EMU. A train where a lot of the passenger cars receive power from the catenary lines and have this power then turning the wheels. After reading about electric multiple units and how they worked, I thought to myself, well, this is a very smart design because you don't really have to worry about overcrowding. You can just keep adding as many cars as you want, and you don't have to worry about it not being powerful enough to pull the train because every other unit is powered. I can't imagine anything like this ever being retired, I thought to myself. But lo and behold, apparently there are plans to retire it, which saddens me actually. In fact, I will never forgive New Jersey Transit if they take this train out of service, because it is my favorite locomotive. Okay, the next question is, would you use VR or Victorian Railway content? I do plan on doing that in the future. It looks like there's a lot of good content of these trains out there. And I did find an Australian style railroad crossing, so I'm going to be using that as well. Okay, so the next question is, do you know how to enter your serial number in Content Manager? Also, how were you making your horns? I'm doing the same process and it doesn't sound. Okay, so as far as the horns are concerned, I'm not really sure which game you're using because I've had trouble making horns on Trainz 2006 as well as Trainz 2009. Really, the first game that I tried this on that I had success with was Trainz 2012. I actually remember I asked someone who was a professional who made horns for trains regularly how to make a horn when I was using Trainz 2009, and he told me everything I was supposed to do, exactly what type of files I needed, etc. And when I did everything that he told me to do step by step, I would press the horn and I wouldn't hear anything, and I used to find that so frustrating. And then I'd be like, okay, I did everything you told me to do, but the horn's still not sounding. So yeah, it could have something to do with the game that you're using. I'm not sure. It could also be the file type. One thing I do know about making horns though is that it has to be a .wav file, and I also know that the audio has to be uncompressed. For some reason, if it's compressed, it won't work. I'm not sure how that works or anything. I'm not really a sound expert. I just know what the other people told me on how to make a horn. Now, I might be able to help you if you provide more information, such as which game are you using and what apps are you using to create and convert the sound files, and basically in full detail the entire process that you're using. I might be able to help with that, but I need a little bit more information and specifically what the problem is. As for help on entering the serial number, if you're using Trainz12, then from this menu, click on Options. This menu will pop up with the option to enter another CD key, which is also another word for the serial number of the game. Now, it has to be entered exactly the way it appears in the game cover, which means you have to include the hyphens, and I'm not sure, but I think it's case sensitive too. And when you're finished typing it in the CD key field, just click Add, and it should work. Now, I don't remember how to do it in Trainz: A New Era, because I don't think I have the disc form of that game anymore. Oh wait, yeah, I still do, but I also have the I'm using the downloaded version right now, and I don't think the downloaded version used a serial number. I don't remember for sure. So I don't remember how to do it on Trainz: A New Era. I'll try to find out if that's the one you need help with. Okay, so the next question asks, you ever planning on making GE AC traction motor track sounds for GE AC locos? It could be useful for ES44 AC, AC44, and AC6000s. Because I love the sound of those screaming GE AC traction motors at high speeds. Or maybe trying making a CSX AC60K5HLL too, at least if it happens. Congrats on the many subs. Okay, first of all, thank you for congratulating me for the many subscribers I have. And second of all, I do plan on making AC traction motor track sounds, or really any track sounds that are of the traction motors of locomotives. However, the main issue I'm having with that is I can't find any footage of the traction motors going through their different ranges of power, I guess would be the right term for it. If I could find enough footage of the traction motors doing that, then I do plan on making track sounds of them in the future. Okay, so the next question is, what is your favorite version of Trainz? It's kind of hard to decide, but it's either Trainz12 or Trainz: A New Era. I like a lot of the textures and the fact that the water has reflections on Trainz: A New Era, and I also like the way night lighting looks in Trainz: A New Era. But Trainz12 is actually better than Trainz: A New Era in some situations, especially the AI. For example, when modeling Union Station on New Jersey Transit, I had no problem on Trainz12 getting the passenger cars to go left and the freight trains to go right at Union Station, because I'll show you a picture of it, but the station has 4 rails. 2 of them are for passenger trains so that they're close enough to the platform, and the other 2 are for freight trains because they're wider than the passenger trains and have to be switched further away from the platform so that they won't actually collide with it. I remember a New Jersey Transit engineer explaining to me that if the freight train was switched to the closer track, it would actually hit the platform and probably cause a large derailment. So it's really important that these switches exist at this station. Now, I had no problem getting the passenger trains to go left and the freight trains to go right on Trainz12, but for some reason in Trainz: A New Era, when the passenger train arrives at the station, it uses the right track, and then it goes right through the station without stopping, and then it keeps going until it goes into the portal where the freight trains are supposed to disappear off screen. And I'm like, why is it so hard to get this train to go left? Like, I tell it to go to a track mark, and to get to this track mark, it would have to change the switch to the left. And for some reason, it just leaves the switch. It not only does it leave the switch in the right position, but it locks it into the right position, and it won't go. I mean, it won't go to the station, and it's so frustrating. And most of the time, I don't know what it is, but for some reason the freight trains favor going to the left. they always switch to the left, go through the station, and then continue to follow the path that I designated for the passenger trains. For example, one train I had on track 1, it went to Union Station, switching the switches to the left, and then it went to Roselle Park Station, and then at CFA Adeline, I think I'm pronouncing it right, it changed the switch to the right, and then traveled down the Raritan Valley line, and then it stopped, and I'm like, why are you doing this? You're supposed to be going to the portal and disappearing off camera. Why are you traveling down the passenger trains lines? And no matter how hard I try, I just can't seem to get these freight trains to do what they're supposed to. So I said, okay, just forget realism right now. There's going to be 4 tracks on this main line. 2 of them are going to be for passenger trains. The other 2 for freight trains. They're never going to share the same tracks because I can't deal with this right now. It's too frustrating trying to get both of these trains to use the correct switches when they just choose not to. So the short answer to your question would be, some things are better in Trainz 12, other things are better in Trainz A New Era. Okay, the last question is, what is your general geographical area? I'm not quite sure anyone will want to know this. Now, obviously I can't supply an exact address because that's dangerous. Plus, my sister told me about this one YouTuber she watches that he gave people his address and someone called the SWAT team on him. Like, he didn't do anything wrong. They just thought it would be a funny prank to have the SWAT team called on him. And apparently, they showed up at his house and destroyed everything. So yeah, I don't think it's worth the risk of having everything you hold dear to you destroyed, so I can't provide an exact address. I will say that I live in the Lehigh Valley area, but that's pretty much all I can say. Okay, that was the last question. If you have any more questions that you'd want answered, go ahead and go to the community tab, and when I get 50,000 subscribers, I will answer the rest of them. I might end up having a lot of questions by that time and may even end up having to split this into a 2-part segment. But yeah, if there are any questions you want answered in the next video like this, feel free to ask them in the community tab. And that's all for now.